Okay, so now we're going to move on to making our bird. This is a piece of tin that came off of an old barn. It's just a scrap piece. You just take your tin snips and cut out a piece large enough that you can, trace your patterns onto it. Then you print out your bird pattern and cut it out, and you just use a pencil to trace around. Doesn't have to be perfect. This is a pretty forgiving pattern. You use one bird body, and you'll use your pattern for the wing twice. You'll set it on there twice and trace around it. As you can see, the pencil does a good job of marking. You can see it quite well. So when you're laying these out to trace around them, make sure you give yourself plenty of room between each piece. You don't want to set it up next to, your bird body if you're tracing around it, because your tin snips need a little bit of room to be able to cut. So give yourself plenty of room when you're cutting around this. When you go to cut, make sure you're wearing your protective gloves, goggles. I recommend a pair of good heavy leather work gloves. You don't want to be cutting yourself with rusty tin. It'll save you a trip to the emergency room to get a tetanus shot. So I don't happen to have any work gloves on me right now, so I'm just going to go ahead and cut this out. But you shouldn't do that. So the first thing I like to do is cut the sections, and then I go back around and I trim them. So I'm going to cut this down, make small cuts. Try not, it's not like scissors. You don't want to start back here and cut the full length of the cut. If you make tiny cuts just using the tip of your tin snips, you'll have a lot more control. Unless you're doing a very long straight edge, you'll have a lot more control over what you're doing, what you're cutting. So small cuts. If you can't get to one side, then you turn your piece around and cut from a different direction. Never force, because if you're forcing a piece, you could slip and cut yourself. Just take your time, make small cuts. Don't be afraid of the tin snips. They will do a good job for you if you just give them some time. Tiny cuts. Again, when you get so far, turn your piece around and cut from a different angle. It'll save you a lot of hassle and aggravation. So that piece is a scrap piece. I'm going to set it aside. You can see I have a bird body and my other wing. I'm going to go ahead and cut this excess off here. That gives me a little bit more room to work, to move my tin snips where I want them. It's not as hard as you think it might be. Tin actually cuts pretty easy with a good new pair of tin snips. If your tin snips are all rusty, save yourself the hassle. They're not that expensive. Go ahead and go buy you a new pair. You can get a pair for $5 or $6, depending on where you go. So now that these main pieces are cut out, I'm going to go down the lines and actually trim each piece out. Take your time, use small cuts, watch your sharp edges, such as this one here. Don't poke yourself. You don't want any cuts to your skin, only cuts to the metal. Small cuts will get you where you need to be, and if you get stuck, go from a different angle. Now these sharp corners, I always snip off the tip. I don't like to have a very sharp corner there. So set that excess piece out to the side. So I've got one wing cut out. I'm going to work on my other wing. Very small cuts allows you to bend and curve around your metal piece. Again, if you get stuck, cut from another angle. Cut off some excess if you need to. It'll give you more room to maneuver with your tin snips. Small cuts. We're almost there. Just got to trim that one side. I'm going to move these extra pieces off to the side. Working from a different direction. And I always snip off sharp points. Once we get these done and we get the fabric around, you won't see that point. It'll look fine. I'm going to go onto the bird. Small cuts. So that you can angle where you want to go. I'm going to go ahead and cut off that excess piece there so I can move my tin snips around better. Okay. Keep going around the bird. Small cuts. And now I'm going to go from a different direction so I can get the angle that I want. If your hands get tired during this, just go ahead and take a break. You know, wiggle your hand around, let those muscles rest. You can always go back to it. A fatigued hand can slip and cause a cut or an accident. So go ahead and let those hands rest if they get tired. So, now we've got our bird body and our two wings. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to file those edges so that they're nice and smooth. So you're just going to take a little rasp, a little file, and just quickly run over those edges, just to make sure there's no little pieces of metal hanging out that can poke you or snag on something. You don't have to sit there and file it into submission, but just enough to get the extra points off. I need to retrim that, I think. Go at a different angle here. And then I'll just file it down. There's the bird body. I'm going to do a wing here. Back and knock off any excess little burrs. Go to the last wing and just kind of file those down. Files are Again, another cheap tool. They're handy to have if you're going to be working with metals in your mixed media. A file, a tin snip, a hammer, and a plier. That's about all you need. Maybe occasionally a Dremel. Okay, so we've got our pieces cut out and filed. Got another spot on this. Okay, and so I'm going to clean up this mess, and then we'll go on to working with fibers in our next